This is a 2008 Toyota Land Cruiser. We're going to be changing the transmission fluid, not just doing a pan fluid change like what they do at the dealership where they only drain about 3 quarts of fluid and replace that, but we're going to try to flush basically the entire system out. We're going to be using the vehicle's own pump to help us out. Okay, so now we're under the vehicle and we are looking towards the front. Oh, sorry. So we're looking towards the front. Here's the transmission pan. This is the drain plug. Right there. The overfill port is there. On the side, this is the pump. And actually right above here, we're going to pay attention to that because that is a thermostat, and that is a thermostat shaft. We're going to be pushing that in and then using a paper clip. There's little holes in there. We're going to use a paper clip to hold that in, which will keep the thermostat open so that when the pump is, so that doesn't matter what temperature is, this pump will pump the transmission fluid towards the coolers at the front. Otherwise, that thermostat might close up on you and you won't get any fluid pumping if it's too cold. The drain plug, and this is the check port here on the side. We're looking at the front of, looking towards the front of the vehicle. And then the transmission fill plug, you can see, is right there. It's a 24mm plug. It says WS on it, and so you can't miss that. But that's the fill plug right there. Look on the side. Okay, so I've driven the vehicle recently, so the transmission is warm. And first up, I'm going to go ahead and loosen the drain plug. It's a 14mm socket, and it is nicely not very tight. So it looks like it was torqued down on the proper spec last time. So the fluid's dark, as expected. I don't know when the last time it was ever changed. The service at the dealership says they only drain 3 quarts and refill 3 quarts, which doesn't make a lot of sense. If you had a skunky beer, you wouldn't only tip out, you know, a quarter of the glass and put fresh beer in. So this doesn't really make sense to me. So we're gonna go ahead and fill the whole system. I did go ahead and get a new crush washer for the drain plug. So once this is done draining, I'll put the new washer on and we'll tighten that down to the proper torque spec. So we're going to put a new crush washer on there. Had to pick that up from the dealership and they wanted, I think, $5 per crush washer. So anyway, that's how it goes. So things have taken a turn for the worse and I've done something very stupid. I live and die by torque specs, and I always try to follow the Toyota factory service manual. And so what we're looking at here is the drain plug for the transmission pan. And I misread the factory service manual. I did a search for transmission drain plugs and I found what appeared to be the manual transmission version of a 200 series, which of course is not for sale in the United States. And I over torqued it and I stripped it. So now it won't tighten. I think I went way too high. I think I went to 27 foot-pounds. The actual torque value should be 15. So learned from my mistake. It's 15 foot-pounds. And so now I have ordered a new pan. I'm going to drop the pan, and while I'm in there I'm going to change the screen, put a new gasket, and basically at least it gives me an opportunity to refreshen everything inside. And yeah, that's the silver lining there, I suppose. Yeah, so this video is going to be a little bit more in-depth than we had originally anticipated. So here I've ordered the new parts. I've got a transmission pan, a new pan. I bought the gasket that goes around the pan. I bought the new strainer that goes inside that strains the fluid. It's, I guess, in lieu of a traditional filter. And then of course there's a little O-ring that goes around the strainer. And then of course I had to buy a new drain plug and pressure washer, which I did as well. So if you're going to remove the transmission pan, which we just discovered that I have to since I stripped the transmission drain plug, there are 12 bolts that hold the transmission pan on. They are only torqued to 65 inch-pounds. Now the very rear, all these bolts just go into, you know, like the transmission housing. Let's see if I can get that camera in here. The very rear ones, the outermost outboard kind of rear ones, actually go through. I'll see if I can get a camera on that, but they go through, and what happens is that tends to get them corroded a little bit more. You can see right there, I've already sprayed some stuff on there. Don't know if you can see the top part of that. But anyway, so because they only take 65 inch-pounds, you want to make sure that you clean up the backs of those threads a little bit. You can see right there, that's focusing properly, but you can see the thread sticking out. I want to make sure that those are clean. Spray a little Croil or, you know, penetrant on there and let it soak, because you don't want to strip that out. At 65 inch-pounds, it's going to be really easy to do that. And there, it's the two outer rear ones, so just pay extra special attention to that, because we know this can go sideways quickly and really start to suck. So I've dropped the pan, and to my surprise, there was an amazing amount of oil still left in here. So you can see the drain plug there is on the left, and this was all still dirty oil that's left in here. There's, gosh, I would say that's at least a quart, if not more, of really old, yucky oil. Now, so I'm surprised that the transmission service recommendation from Toyota is just to leave all this stuff in there. That doesn't make any sense to me. So there's some magnets at the bottom of this pan also that we're going to have to take off and put in the new pan. And then we will, of course, put a new gasket on. And I'm going to change the screen inside the transmission, and then we'll put it all back together. So these are the magnets that we're talking about. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 magnets, and let's see here. As you can see, if I take, this is what's capturing a lot of sludge. So that's the stuff. You can see that, but that's kind of, I guess, metallic sludge particles and, you know, whatnot junk that's in there. So this, I'm actually, you know, again, silver lining, I made a boneheaded mistake, but at the same time, it's allowing me to kind of see what's in here and just get this cleaned up properly. So, not too bad. Yeah, there's a lot of junk on there. Check it out. So these magnets we'll just take off and we'll put in the new pan after we clean them, of course. So, here we are looking at the transmission. That looks complicated. And this is the strainer, this big black thing here. So you can see that screw there. I believe that's a 10mm head. There's going to be 4 of those. 1, 2, and then towards the front there's going to be some just like that as well. We're going to go ahead and remove those, and there should be an O-ring that the strainer connects to the rest of the, I think it's a valve body. With, so we'll remove that as well, and we've got a new one of those to go in. So I've loosened these 4. There's 1 right there, 2, 3, and 4. So they just came in. They were very, I forget what the torque spec is, but it's they are in there pretty darn easy. Loose. I don't know if that makes sense. Very low torque value. So you can see this is just going to come out here, and I'm sure there's going to be fluid dripping down as well. I have made a mess of my garage floor, but anyway, so be sure you got something to catch that, and those are the ones we're going to remove. So this is the screen that came out of the transmission. We were looking at it from this underside here. As you can see, actually it's kind of full of transmission fluid in there. So anyway, but this there's a little tiny O-ring on here that you're going to replace. So, just to show you real quick what the new screen looks like. So that's the filter in the new screen. That's the old one. So I'm happy to change this. Don't know why this isn't part of any kind of service interval, but that's the difference between a new one and one with about 100,000 miles on it. So we put in the new screen, and I just hand tighten these a little bit, and so we're going to tighten these down to 7 foot-pounds. So I've got a very small 1/4 inch drive torque wrench, and 7 foot-pounds is 84 inch-pounds. So that's what we're going to tighten this to, and I've already kind of tightened it a little bit, so you can see actually I've tightened it down already to the proper spec. It's 84 inch-pounds. Yeah, and so we're ready now. We're going to go ahead and put this transmission pan in. You can see the magnets here are in place. I got the gasket in place. I've gone ahead and transferred the overfill plug I put in. I got my new drain plug in there, not over tightened, and so I've got 12 bolts we're going to put in, and they only go to 65 inch-pounds, which is very, very low. So if you recall, when I was removing the transmission pan towards the back, so these two outermost holes here, the screws end up going through the pan and through the transmission, whatever, the flange, and they actually come all the way through, so the screws penetrate through. And because those got kind of rusty already, the other ones looked fine. The other ones got kind of rusty. I had somebody had given me that piece of advice beforehand, so I went ahead and ordered 2 new fasteners to go ahead and go through there, just so I wouldn't have to put those kind of rusty bolts back in there. I just didn't like that. There's something else that I plan on doing here, so I've gotten started. The bolts that came out of the transmission pan, they still looked a little kind of corroded on the tips, and having gone through this issue here, I do not want to strip anything. So I'm going to run these just real quickly through through these dies here, and just to clean up the threads. Just make sure you use your die gauge, and you want to make sure you got the right threads per inch. Oops. And anyway, I'm just cleaning them up so that we don't have any issue when I start throwing them back in. And we've got the oil pan on. Oops. And I have torqued all 12 bolts down to 65 inch-pounds. All the bolts here are torqued down. Just double check here, 65 inch-pounds. I've already crisscrossed everything, so just double checking those. And that's, so I've run a 5-inch line just into the transmission fill port there, and just kind of snaked it up in through the engine compartment. I tried to avoid the exhaust, of course, because we're going to be running the engine a little bit. But then I'm going to put a funnel on the other side there, and I should be able to fill it up nice and easy. So the other side of that line is connected to this funnel, and there's that clear plastic hose. And I tend to keep funnels, and I use them only for one purpose. So I've got a funnel for engine oil, for coolant, and transmission fluid, etc. I just don't want to contaminate fluids. So they're cheap, it's easy to keep stored, and just keeps you clean. So we're going to start filling it up. And here's the fluid going into the transmission right there. So this is the transmission pump that's going to pump fluid out of the transmission towards the coolers. And right there you can see there's a little thermostat, essentially is what that is, and you're going to be depressing that center button, and you can see that on the sides there's little holes. We're going to put a paper clip in there, and that will keep that thermostat in the open position so that when I start the car to pump the fluid, it will actually go towards the front coolers. Otherwise it won't do that until you reach a certain temperature. Okay, so now we're under the car. This is at the front, so we're looking, this is underneath the radiator. And what I've done is on the passenger side, this is the exit port that comes out. So what's happening is the transmission line is going through the first cooler, which is located in front of the radiator and the grill. It comes out of there, goes into the cooler that's part of the radiator. So it enters here. and then it goes through the radiator and exits here. So this way I'm going to get the fluid being flushed through both of the transmission coolers. So, and then I've added a line that goes from there into this bucket, and we are going to run the engine, run the car through the gears a little bit, and we'll fill it up to 3 quarts, and then we're going to shut it down. And I'm going to add 3 quarts of transmission fluid to the transmission, and we'll do this again, and we'll do this a few times until you get really nice, clean looking fluid. So the engine's running now, and I'm running through the gears. I have an assistant telling me when I'm getting close to filling up to 3/4. So about 3/4. Just running through the gears. Tell me when to stop.
3, 2, 1, stop.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So this is the transmission fluid that came out of that first run. This is what Toyota service department would tell you is okay to leave in. That's gross.
Yes. One-fourth. A half. Three-fourths. About an inch. Three, 2, 1, stop.
Okay, so this is the last bit of fluid that came out. As you can see, this looks essentially like new fluid. So all of that fluid that came out so far, I've taken out 9 quarts, and this is much cleaner than what we started with. So looks like we've done a pretty good job of flushing out the transmission. I'll be topping it off and then doing the test to make sure that we've got the exact right volume. So as a quick comparison of the fluid that came out. So this is what the transmission fluid looked like basically when we started the first drain. When I first took a drain sample out of the pan. This is what it looked like after I went through, and it looked very similar to this actually after that first couple of first flush. This was after the 3rd flush, and this is actually brand new fluid here. So you can see that we're probably right in between here and here. Okay, now we're going to be following the Toyota service manual on how to ensure that the temperature is at the transmission temperature is at the proper temperature in order to check the level. So there's a specific procedure here where you're jumping 2 connector points and the OBD port right there. You're going to connect 4 and 13, and then you're going to run through a little series of tests here. You run through the gears, and then you move the shift lever to drive and quickly move back and forth between neutral and drive once within 1.5 seconds for at least 6 seconds, which will activate the fluid temperature detection mode. And then it's going to tell you here, so the drive light will remain illuminated for 2 seconds and then it will turn off. And essentially it's going to give you a signal as to when the temperature is correct by, let's see, when the fluid temperature is correct, the indicator, the D indicator, will come on when it reaches the right temperature. And if it starts to blink, then you've exceeded the temperature. Okay, so we've activated the temperature detection mode by following the directions there. Shifted the, we jumped those two connector points, shifted the vehicle went through the gears and shifted between neutral and drive a couple of times. It says 6 times, which activated the mode. And then after that, once we see that it activated by the D light staying on and then turning off, put it back into park. We pull the connectors that we've jumped, and then we can see that there's no indicator on here. So, according to the manual here, we removed, put the vehicle back into park, and then we're going to allow for the engine to idle until the fluid temperature reaches the proper temperature. And what's going to happen is the drive D should come on again, which is interesting because we're not in drive. So we'll see what happens here once we get up to temperature. And so once we're waiting for this light to come back on, the D light, and once that happens, we're going to check the fluid level by pulling the overflow plug in the transmission pan. And this is documented here in the manual as well. And so we pull that out. If fluid is coming out, that means that we've got more than enough in there. And then you allow it to trickle, basically come out to us just like a trickle. And then basically we're going to put a new crush gasket on the fill or the overflow plug, and we're going to torque that down to 15 foot-pounds, if that's correct. If we don't have any fluid coming out, then we know that we need to add some additional fluid. And when that happens, then we'll run through this process again to make sure that we still have enough. And what's interesting is that you're actually going to check the fluid level while the engine is running. Okay, the drive light just came on. Now we're in park, so that's interesting. But the drive light came on. That tells us that it's time to check. So we're going to go under and pull that overflow valve and make sure that something's trickling out, hopefully. And also, just to be sure, everyone knows, of course, make sure you chock your tires, so just in case something happens. Just a little safety. So under the car, I'll just loosen the overflow. We're just getting a tiny bit coming out, just a little bit. So I think we got just the right amount in there, actually. So I'm going to put a new pressure washer on and tighten this down, and I think we are good. Okay, so I've shut the engine off. We're just at the right amount of fluid. I think we just got lucky there. Anyway, and now I put in a new crush gasket. I tightened it, probably not to 15 foot-pounds yet, but I'm going to go ahead and make sure that torque value is correct. And I'm going to reinstall the rubber O-ring that goes on the refill plug and torque that down to 29 foot-pounds. And we are done. Sweet. Hey guys, thanks for watching my first video. I know you're saying, no way, that was your first video, but anyway, it was, and after kind of reviewing it and trying to put it together, I need to apologize. If you were playing a drinking game and you had to drink a beer every time I said the word then you are probably just totally lit or passed out by now. So I want to apologize for that. I do want to say thanks for watching. If you have any questions, drop me a line. I'll try to answer them as quick as I can. I also wanted to say that you are doing this at your own risk, of course. I did it at my own risk and I screwed something up. Luckily the fix wasn't that difficult. And you know, at the end of the day, we got to kind of see what was inside that transmission pan. So it was kind of fun to do it anyway. Anyway, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.